Hey guys, this is Jordan from Worship Online, and today we're going over chord shapes. So in past posts, I've kind of reviewed some really basic chord shapes to play, but today I'm going to be going over certain ones that I kind of gravitate towards or that I prefer in the keys of G and D. The reason is for that is because A, those are two of the most common keys used, and B, you can capo pretty much anywhere on the neck and get away and play in any key, period, by using chords in those keys. For instance, if I wanted to play in the key of F, I could capo 3 and play D chord shapes. Or if I wanted to play in C, I could capo 5 and play with G chord shapes, and just, there's a lot of different options there, but you can pretty much get away with it. And one of the best benefits of those keys is that all of the open strings of the guitar, the notes of those fall into both of those keys. So it gives you a lot of options in regards to just open chords and what you can play. So let's start off talking about the key of D. There's so many different options across the neck that you can go to in D. It's probably my favorite key to play in. And just as a disclaimer before we get into this, that it's always really important to kind of like push yourself and playing keys that you're not used to. I try to practice in other keys that aren't G and D because a lot of the times that's really easy for me, because it's important to kind of stretch your brain the way you think about things, and each key has its particular voicings that it has. That same with playing keys as well. Usually when you're playing in certain keys like F or whatever, you're going to gravitate towards chord shapes that you wouldn't in the key of C. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at this. This isn't like the perfect way to play guitar, the only way to play guitar. This is just how I approach these particular keys, and hopefully you'll pick up on something new or something that inspires you. So obviously we all know the open chord shapes down low. It's extremely easy to play in D because you can just keep your hand in the same spot and never have to move. You can play every chord in the key, all right there, kind of anchoring down there on that D chord shape, like doing a B minor or 6, really just adding the 2nd fret on the A string there with that same D chord shape. But a lot of good chord playing is about what strings you're not playing and knowing how to mute them, whether that's with your right hand or with your left hand, and there's different ways to do that. But a good guitar player can mute those strings very easily, whether that's wrapping your thumb around the top or just slightly letting those other fingers that are fretting notes hang over and mute the string after. Like when you're fretting that 2nd fret on the B on the A string, I'm also muting the D string there. So this may be elementary for a lot of you guys watching this, but just figured I'd review it. So when it comes to open chords, I try to add in other strings for variation, especially when I'm picking different arpeggiated parts. So I'm adding in the 9 there on that G chord for a little bit more flavor. Because traditionally you'd play the open G string, but I'm adding in the 2nd fret or the 9 of the scale right there on the G string. Makes the chord a little bit more interesting. So as you're playing arpeggiated parts, you can play around with that stuff. I pretty much always play the D with the open E string for pretty much a lot of these. Sometimes I make the A chord, the 5th chord a sus by adding in the D on the B string there. So like having those options and playing around with them is what keeps things from getting stale. 1/3 is super easy. You're just muting the A string and you're playing the 2nd fret there. So this is all very basic for a lot of you guys. But when you're getting more into moving shapes, I love playing these style chords. So what I'm doing there is I'm keeping the D string open the entire time, and I love hybrid picking, so keeping my pick in my, as I normally would, but using my ring finger and my middle finger to pluck the other strings. And so I'm keeping the D string open the entire time in all these chord shapes, as I mentioned. This is a B minor, and it's kind of based on the bar chord, but you're only playing a lot of times just the G string, the open D, and then the low E string. So that's all on the 7th fret there. And then also adding in the B string if you want it. But when I'm like switching to the other shapes, I'm not really adding in that B string a whole lot of times. It just kind of depends how I'm feeling. But with these shapes, they're all kind of built on this bar chord shapes that everyone knows. And you can add in the octave there and not play the open D string. It just kind of depends on what flavor you like, and I'll change it up all the time. But the nice thing about having the open D is that you can move the higher notes around. So this is a 10th chord. So you're playing the 1, and then you have the open D in there, but then you're adding the 10th note of that scale relative to that root note. It's a very common pop chord. But then you can walk down while still keeping on the G. So walking down from the 4th to 2nd fret on that G string there to add a little bit more flavor. And same thing for like the B. Go to the A. Walking around on the D chord up there. And even add in the high B string. So you can do whatever there. And so there's a lot of options and playing around there. I love lower string parts. I don't know, I just kind of gravitate towards it. But you can do the same thing on the higher strings, on the A string, G and B. So you're playing like that D bar chord, but you're only playing the octave and then the 10th. And so you can slide around. So you're doing the same thing, you're just doing it on the higher strings instead of playing the full bar chord. So full bar chord can sound pretty like classic or indie and whatnot, which is good for certain vibes. It all depends on what you want. I kind of just gravitate towards that more pop feel. And yeah, so that sums up those moving shapes. Another thing that I go to in the key of D is based all around the open D string. It's the best part of playing in the key of D. But if you're thinking about this position that's rooted on this D major chord here, and you leave that D string open, you can walk down on the B string from the F sharp there to the E, the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 2nd. If you just play around between the 1, the 2, and the 3 all the time, that's how so many melodies are made. So playing around in this position here, and then even adding the 5th on the high E string, you can create some great arpeggiated parts. You can even drive that if you want. But yeah, so playing this shape over the 1 or the 6 even, because the 1 and the 6 can mesh really well together. And then dropping down to the 2nd, the E on the B string there allows you to play over the 5 or the A. And then you can even walk down to the 7th, 6th fret on the G string there, which will work over the A chord or the 5th chord. And then you can go down to the G. So I'm walking around that a lot. I'm also playing these kind of funk chords, usually around the 6th, B minor in the key of D. So I'm building a lot of arpeggiated parts and melodies around that. And while we're here, let's talk about 6th chords, which are my favorite. Kind of why I was inspired to bring this up. It's kind of one of the ways I try to add flavor to chord progressions and add a little bit more complexity to what we're doing on stage. So for instance, a power chord is called a 5th chord, obviously, right? So let's take a look at the A, you know, the 5th. So adding in the 6th note, because you got the 1, the 5th in relation to the A, and then you add in the 6th note in there, you get a really, it's kind of dissonant in a way, and it kind of adds this tension to the chord, but it makes it really beautiful to me. So I'm sliding around in this position a lot in a lot of songs. So this would be the G shape, which would be the 5th fret on the D string, 7th fret on the G string, and then the 5th fret on the B string. And I'm muting the other strings with my other fingers and whatnot. That would be the A. For the B minor, it's just the 10th fret on the B string there that I'm adding into that power chord. And so I'll do that a lot. I'll do it up high as well. So if I added on some vibrato and like a big reverb, you do this. It's doing the same thing we're doing down low, but you know, it's a different way of doing it. So the next chord shapes that I want to note in the key of D is what I kind of refer to as the ever be chords. So if you're playing kind of that D major shape, it's based on that chord up there. You know, the 12th fret of the D string, 11th fret of the G, and 10th fret of the B string. You get that D major triad, but you also get that open E, which is the 2nd of the scale. And you create this very beautiful chord. For the 5th of the key, like the 5th chord, the A in this case, I would just drop down on the G string right there. And then for the 4th, you just play the 12th fret on the G string there. When it goes to the 6th chord, for instance, or the 3rd, 1/3, I just hang on the D chord, but you can create some nice arpeggiated parts up there. All right, so let's go over the key of G. So for some sliding chords that you can play with some open strings, I love to play off the open G and B strings. But you're really fretting on the A and the D strings the entire time, so you can either play power chords, or you can play the 1 and the 3, which is kind of what I gravitate towards. So when I'm playing like an open G, I love to play those 3rd chords. So like that E minor would be like the 7th fret and the 5th fret of the A and D strings. I love to keep the B string open, adds a little bit of dissonance and tension. For some reason, I just gravitate towards that stuff. Like a lot of traditional open G, no one really plays that 3rd there on the A string. Everybody's muting that. Playing everything open, you can add in the high string. But, you know, I kind of gravitate towards just playing the 3rd fret on the B string there and muting that high E. But what I like to do, you know, add in the 9, or just keep it fully open with no, with an open B string. So I'm always playing between those notes and whatnot, but going to like the 4. Like when you got reverb on, you can get really vibey. So those are chord shapes that I'm always going to. I love to keep the strings open and just play off of those. Yeah, but when I'm down low, I'm not playing the high E string a lot. Some people do. Some people love to play the D like that. I feel like it sounds too happy to me. So I kind of resort to just moving the root note around a lot. You can play the E minor, like a big open power chord. But a lot of times, I'll jump up to these type of chords, which is my next example. And I'll mix these a lot, which, you know, like a good reference for that would be Our God by Tomlin. You know, everybody knows that song. You know, well, that's not the song, but those are the types of chords. And you're playing the root note on the A string, keeping the open G string, and then fretting on the B string. But it's all based off of your traditional bar chords. But you're only playing those 3 strings. And I'll kind of like walk down on the 4 there a lot, just to add some variety. But yeah, usually when I'm playing rhythm, I'll slide up to that high E and even add in like a high E string there on the 5th fret. But yeah. Or No Other Name by Hillsong, that's another good reference. But it's all based off of kind of your traditional pop chords. So what I do a lot too is also not have the open G string. So you can either play just that root note on the A string and, oh sorry, that was up. And you can play the 10th of the scale. Hybrid picking again, this is all very similar to the key of D that I was just referencing. But it's the same general concept. You have so many different options in these keys, but I'm always kind of thinking about how I want to voice things, and I'll mix things up so it doesn't sound very stale. Because if you're just doing like the traditional like worship chords, and it can get really old sometimes. So I'm usually creating variations of these chords. You know, I'll hybrid pick them instead of strumming them. Add some like big reverb to it, and you got some nice textures and whatnot. But yeah, and then everybody kind of jumps to a lot of the box chord shape. You can hang out up the 12th fret a whole lot, and I mentioned a lot of these shapes in another lesson that I've done on Worship Line on the blog. But the same 6 chords that I mentioned in the key of D apply to the key of G as well. Just from how the chords are spaced out across the neck in this particular key, you have a lot of options in the octave. In other keys, it's a little bit more limited. You can't, like for instance, like A flat. There's not a lot of open string options down there, and playing these sorts of chords can get a little bit more rocky. So sometimes it's just easier to capo and play in the key of G, or I don't know, it just lends itself to so many different options. But yeah, that's those 6 chords up top. Another thing in G that I'm doing a lot is I'll just play these high B and E strings on the 3rd fret, and I'll mess around with different notes going around that on the open G and D strings. Like if I add a lot of like reverse reverb to it. You can get a lot of great textures there. So I'll do that a lot. Everybody kind of plays around with the lines, the open G string, and playing different notes on the B string there. You can do the same chords I mentioned earlier. And the key of D there as well. So there you have it. Hopefully that helps. Really the biggest thing to me is like the hybrid picking on the moving parts, using the open strings, looking for places where I can add tension where it doesn't get too weird. And a lot of that is in the adding the 6th or adding in the 9. Like a traditional G, add 9. But you're just playing it in a different way. And adding in those little notes into the chord just adds that extra vibe, the extra flavor that really kind of separates a lot of great playing from more basic playing. So there you have it. Hope you guys had fun. Feel free to check us out more on Worship Online and let us know if you have any questions. There are so many different brands and types of amps out there, but there's really 3 main types.
The goal is just to make it sound as full plus articulate as possible.
In a lot of flow moments in worship, I'm always trying to find things that don't get in the way, that's not too distracting, but it's ambient and it's not just swelling. I'm always trying to challenge myself to play a part, more than just doing atmospheric stuff. Tuning is probably the most important thing that we can talk about. I mean, but it's pretty simple. It's just like, make sure your guitar's in tune.
Just trust your ears. If it sounds good, it sounds good. If it sounds bad, fix it.